Welcome to this media partnership with Directive, organised by the European Paper Packaging Alliance, the EPPA. I'm Brian Maguire. I'll be presenting the programme today. Our topic today is the revision of the EU's packaging and packaging waste rules, putting the product life cycle at the heart of the circular economy. The upcoming revision of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, the PPWD, offers an opportunity for sustainable packaging solutions to advance the EU's climate neutrality and circular economy objectives. Today's discussion gives an opportunity to stakeholders from all spectrums to consider what the new rules should focus on in order to achieve the objectives of the European Green Deal. Of course, it's essential to rely on evidence-based solutions at a time when the European Union is working to create a truly circular economy. This is why Ramboll will present its latest study, which challenges the common perception that reusable tableware found in European quick-service restaurants for in-store consumption has lower environmental impacts than current paper-based packaging. And to open the program today, we'll have Emiliano Michalizio from Ramboll. He will present this new study. And just before we hear from Emiliano, let me say to you, you can send questions for Emiliano and for the rest of the panel on the right-hand side of your screen in that chat section, and we'll come to those throughout the course of the program as well. You can send them in now, you can send them in later on, but my advice, don't hesitate to do it now. Emiliano, the floor is all yours. Great to see you.
Thank you for your introduction, and thank you to the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present our study. We have a presentation. So I'm glad today to present our study, which is a comparative life cycle assessment where we compare single-use paper packaging with multiple-use dishes in the quick-service restaurant industry. This is a study that has been done by an international group of LCA specialists and environmental consultants in Ramboll. Please, next slide, please. For Ramboll, it is an independent engineering, architecture, and consultancy company headquartered in Denmark with more than 16,000 experts, with 35 present in 35 countries. We serve both private industry and institutions on sustainability and environmental matters. For this project in particular, we put together a team of consultants that were based in Italy, in France, in Germany. So an international group of consultants that work together to deliver this project. I'm representing here the entire team as a project director. Next slide, please. So my presentation, I will try to stay in the 15 minutes. I will present the framework and the aim of the study, what are the main differences of these studies compared to other studies, the systems that we have investigated, the results, and of course some conclusions. Next one, please. What is the framework? Ramboll has been commissioned by European Paper Packaging Alliance to conduct this study. We conducted the study with the support of all EPPA members, and particularly paper manufacturers and converters that had a key role also on providing data, primary data for our study that we will see later are very important to define and to define the functional unit that is essential for those studies. The study has been concluded in December. It covers EU 27 plus UK. It represents an average scenario in Europe. This has been reviewed by a third party, by Truth North, and then it has been also updated in Q3 last year due to an extensive update of the GABI database that we use for the study. Next one. The aim of the study is to compare two different systems in the in a very specific case, which is the quick service restaurant industry, in accordance with ISO standards that are applicable to comparative LCAs. We compared a single-use paper packaging dishes system with an equivalent system with a multiple-use dishes. We would see later that we mainly tested PP products, plastic products, as a multiple-use dishes system, but also we tested other materials. The study aimed at comparing environmental performances of both systems and identifying the hotspots that are different for the two systems. And this is, I think, it's provided a good basis for discussion with our other representatives. Also, for the today debate, I think it's important to understand that we are talking about two different systems with two different hotspots that needs, of course, to be addressed in different ways. Next one. So the comparison, you see here that the current system in quick service restaurant is basically based on disposable products, which are paper product with a PE content of less than 10% in weight. And we compared this with a potential alternative system that is based on a multiple-use product, basically made in plastic, in PP in this case. We investigated the full set of dishes that can be used in a quick service restaurant. You see here in this slide that we investigated the cold and hot cup, salad bowl with the lid, the cutlery set, the fry bag, basket and fry carton, the ice cream cups, the wraps and the clamshell for burgers. We tested 7 different single-use product items and 14 different multiple-use products. We tested 2 systems, 2 sets, one totally in PP and the other one combining PP, ceramic, glass, and metal. The next one. There are many studies that are comparing multiple-use with single-use system. I think in our study, we try to use a different approach compared to most of the studies that are available. First of all, we use the system approach. The study is not comparing 2 single products. It's not comparing one cup with another cup. It's comparing a real quick service restaurants working with one system and working with another system. That means that the study assess a functional unit that is equivalent in terms of services provided to the clients, to the customers, but with 2 different products. Considering, of course, the number of servings, the peak hours, the differences in terms of selling burgers versus hot and cold drinks, and so on. The second important difference of this study compared to others is that we could access representative data and primary data, especially for the paper product. Also, to build the functional unit and to, let's say, model the quick service restaurant, we were able to access representative data provided by quick service restaurants operators in terms of number of servings and especially number of product items that are used every day in a restaurant. It's essential in this study, especially when paper products are concerned, to use primary data. So EPPA members who are able to provide primary data, and EPPA members cover more or less 65% of the quick service restaurant business in Europe in terms of food packaging. They were able to provide primary data. This primary data went through a very extensive session to assess their consistency. We compared them with existing database. We compared this with also other sources like for instance, the best available technique publications in Europe. So we try to make our best really to verify this data. And we also honestly have also verified that primary data for paper are normally less conservative than those that are in the official databases. Then we had also to investigate deeply the washing processes that are key for the multiple use system, because of course multiple use dishes must be washed several times. And this is, we will see later, an hotspot for this system. We had to investigate carefully what kind of washing options are available and what are their performances. Finally, I think it's very important to underline that we were given the opportunity to run very extensive sensitivity analysis. So not all studies, or not all LCA comparative studies have such an extensive sensitivity analysis. What is a sensitivity analysis? It is basically a system to analyze different scenarios and different options. Especially, we are comparing here an existing system, a current system, which is the single-use system, with a potential alternative system, which is the multiple-use system. So we were able to go through 3 scenarios for single-use system and 9 for multiple-use system. And we tested different recycling rates, different washing scenarios, different end-of-life allocation approaches. And it is essential also to give transparency to our study and to give to the reader really a sense of what happens if we change one parameter in the system. The next one. Next slide, please. No, this one. Yes, okay. Here you see, for instance, in these pictures, so you see, for instance, the types of dishwashers that we investigated in our study. You see on the right side, the under-counter dishwashers that are mainly used in small food service facilities with, let's say, peak days and peak hours that allow to use these small dishwashers. You see on the left the hood type for internal dishwashing. That is an option for those restaurants that have really the layout and the space available to install these dishwashers. And then you have at the bottom left, you have the hood type for external washing scenarios. So for to analyze a possible option, which is the one where the quick service restaurants send the dishes outside the store to be washed and to be returned. You see here the description of the systems. As I said, I think it's relevant here to go through the assumption, but just to be short, I think it's important that we use for both systems a symmetric approach for what concerns the end-of-life treatment. In the baseline scenario in our study, we consider 30% paper recycling and 70% incineration with energy recovery for both systems. So for both single-use paper packaging system and multiple-use system. For the washing scenario, in the baseline scenario, we have used an average scenario for internal dishwashing. That means that we considered half of quick service restaurants using the under-counter and half using the hood type dishwashers. And of course, also I think it's important that in terms of average use rate for plastic products, we used 100 reuses that account also different replacing reasons, like for instance, damages, losses during the washing. For marketing reasons, they can be changed, or they can be replaced, and so on. So 100 uses is also, we will see later that this is not affecting very much the result. I mean, changing the number of uses is not really key, while in other studies it was key to calculate this breakdown, because these studies were basically comparing 2 single products. In a system perspective, this is not so important. Next one. I think it's relevant to spend a few words about end-of-life processes, because in such studies, this is a critical aspect. And there are a number of, I think, further research is needed also, and also to define a solid approach to model end-of-life processes. it's always a challenge for LCA practitioners. In this case, we'll see that our results are highly dependent on the environmental credits. That for those that are not LCA experts, it means that when you recycle the material, you can you have credits associated with the assumed substitution of fiber materials and the saved energy. We used a system that is really compliant with ISO standards based on the system expansions. But in order to be transparent, we also include in our report other end-of-life allocation criteria, and also we disclose separately the recycling and the energy credits in a way that the readers and the experts can go through the report and make their own conclusions. Next one. Here you have the results of the baseline scenario. As I said, the LCA study includes a baseline scenario, which is an average scenario for Europe, and then the number of additional scenarios have been analyzed with the sensitivity analysis. So you see here the results. You see on the right the indicators that are normally used for LCA. And you see the single-use system and the multiple-use system results. Basically, the single-use system shows significant benefits, very significant benefits for climate change, fine particulate matter, fossil depletion, and freshwater consumption, and terrestrial acidification, while multiple-use system present advantages for freshwater eutrophication, ionizing radiation, metal depletion, and stratospheric ozone depletion. Then, as I said at the beginning, we had an update of the study late last year. Next one. Next slide, please. You see here that after the update of the GAPI data set, also for the metal depletion, we have also an advantage for single-use system. So I'm going to the conclusions now. So I think I'm on time. You see here just the sensitivity analysis that we modeled. As I said before, we model different recycling rates. We model to 0 and 70 recycling rates for both systems. We also model varied demand for multiple-use system and also different washing scenarios. We have changed, you will see in the study that we have changed just one parameter on assumptions being changed per system in order to maintain transparency. Next one, please. Here you see how we represent the sensitivity analysis. And here we have the climate change. If you go to the bottom, it's quite technical, but just to show every dot you see here, the gray line is the multiple-use system. The blue line is the single-use system. You can see where, I mean, that, for instance, in this case, also in all scenarios, the multiple-use system perform better in climate change impact category. And you see also how the multiple-use system is affected by the washing options. This is not very clear, very technical, but just to show you as an example that in the study, everything is very transparent, and you can go through these results in a very independent way. I go to the conclusions because time is running. Here you have another example for freshwater consumption, but I go to the conclusions. So next one. So what are the key findings? First of all, for the two systems, the environmental hotspots occur in different life cycle phases. For the single-use system, major impacts are in the upstream production of the items, while for the multiple-use system is in the use phase. As this is not new. What is important is that dishwashing process and energy consumption is the main contributor for multiple-use system. I would say that also when we test the external washing case, I would say that the impact deriving from logistics activities offset the advantages given by a more efficient process and less energy consumptions. A key finding, I think, is that the fact of increasing recycling, which is key for both systems, but particularly is key for paper-based packaging, that we model at 30% or 70%. We know that paper packaging already has a higher recycling rate, and they have a potential to further grow. But effective recycling has a key effect on freshwater consumption and resource depletions, rather than on climate change. Another key finding is that the energy mix, it's important, affect the results of multiple use system for climate change, for fossil depletion or ionizing radiation. Even we have tested that also, even considering higher share of carbon neutral sources, up to 70%, the results of this study more or less remain the same. Of course, the differences can be used, but single-use systems still present advantages for the same impact categories that in the baseline. I think the next one. The next one, please. So this is the final slide. We are aware that this study is partially in contrast with previous LCA study. I would say that other studies mainly are product focused. And while our study is system-based, we didn't compare two products, we compared two systems. It's important to underline that most studies rely on secondary data concerning especially the paper waste stream.
Emiliano, we have a problem with your sound. I think it's your internet connection. Just give it a moment to see if it stabilizes. I don't think you changed any of the settings there. No, it's not going to. No, it's not going to stabilize. If you just, there we go. We're okay now. Go ahead.
Yes. So just the conclusion. So basically, we know that the study is partially in contrast with other studies. Our study, it's basically, it is now. It's better.
No, it's not. It's come back again as well. I'm sorry. And no, it's okay. Just to say that. Let's try one more time. If it doesn't go this time, well, I think we'll leave it there. It's very, very difficult to hear, but for the moment, it seems clear. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry for that. I'm in an office, very stable connection. So, can you hear me now?
I think it's online. It's fine. I'm told. We have feedback in the studio for that. Okay, please continue.
Okay, so about conclusions, I was just saying that our study is partially in contrast with other study. So we know this, but we have to say that we didn't compare two products. We compared two systems. First, second, we used primary data, especially for paper products, which is essential because we know that that in the databases, especially for paper products, there are data that overestimate some impacts. Third, it's essential to recognize that the hotspots are in different life cycles stages. And also the two systems are very different. The single-use system for paper products is basically focused on environmental impacts, which are very concentrated in the upstream, so in the production of items, so very controlled from an environmental legislation point of view, while multiple-use system the impacts are in the use phase. So it means that a possible transition should consider to implement measures and methods to control impacts during the use phase, and particularly for the washing, where the decisions are taken locally by quick service restaurants operators, so it's more difficult to be controlled.
Thank you.
I hope the conclusions was okay. Okay, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Emiliano, stay with us just a moment. I have a couple of questions from the audience for you as well. And I know you have to go very shortly. So Petro Candos asks, can you please explain what you mean by metal depletion when you compare the two use systems?
The metal depletion, the metal depletion is one impact category, standard impact category for the two, let's say, for the recipe method, is a standard impact category that measures resource depletion in general.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Rally Kayasti. How much of the multiple use climate impact is related to PP and to washing?
The washing is the hotspot for climate, especially for multiple use system. Basically, the climate is impacted by the energy that is needed for washing. It's important to underline that multiple use product, especially PP products, need to be washed and to be dried to guarantee hygienic standards. So energy consumption is the factor that is affecting the results.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of Ramboll's LCA study, what's unique about this study? What's the difference in this study compared to others?
As I said, I think this is a complex matter. I mean, and you can find different studies and different methodologies. We have tried to be as much as possible consistent and severe, let's say, in assessing the data that we input into the model. So primary data were provided, and we went through very intense, let's say, consistency analysis for this data. So use of primary data is for paper-based product, I think, is essential. And then, as I said, we didn't compare two products. We didn't compare two systems. So the product is important, but it's more important how do you use the product. So the system, it's where the product are used, is the one that at the end determine the environmental impact. So I think it's important to for when you run a comparative assay in this domain to try to investigate the system around the product as well.
And just last question, Emiliano. This clearly, as a unique study, it has to be relevant to policymakers. But why should policymakers use life cycle analysis when it comes to making regulations?
Life cycle analysis is a model. Is not the truth. It's trying to represent, let's say, the complexity that it's of the real world. But for sure, it's the method that provides scientific evidences in terms of environmental impact of two different solutions. So for sure, LCA is an essential tool to provide evidences and to provide, let's say, sound conclusions that, of course, then must be interpreted by the regulators and should be evaluated, but this is not the story. So as Ramboll, we just provide science-based studies and evidence-based studies for the regulators and for the community.
Emiliano, thanks very much for your time today and for the presentation of the study as well. We're going to talk about some of these issues with the rest of the panel as well. And take care. We'll see you again soon. Now let's introduce the rest of...
your attention.
Thank you. Well, let's introduce the rest of today's panel. We have with us Dr. Wolfgang Trunk from DG Environment, European Commission, David Scheisler from the European Paper Packaging Alliance, the EPPA, Elsa Agante from Deco Protest, part of the Euro Consumers Group, and Ronan Breen from Deliveroo. Very tempting to say that Ronan's on time today, but we thank you for being here. Thank you, Ronan. So 60 seconds for each of you just to highlight your key points for the day on this topic. Let's kick off with David. David, 60 seconds. Your takeaway for the message for today.
Yeah, so David Scheisler, chairman of CE Scheisler Packaging Solution, a family-owned company producing a wide range of paper-based packaging for food service sector, and treasurer of EPPA. A couple of points. First, our whole value chain is European. When we make single-use paper-based packaging for food service operators, the wood is coming from Europe, the paper is made in Europe. If it's recycled paper, it's made in Europe, converted in Europe, used in Europe, and recycled into secondary packaging, such as a container, tissue paper in Europe. So we're discussing also of a full value chain that is European. And the key point of the EPPA positioning is to bring science in the debate, because first, the 2008 directive means that we need science when we want to derive from the waste hierarchy. So we made a couple of studies, including the Ramboll study that has been displayed to you earlier with very key results. Ramboll has also worked on a meta-analysis of a potential extension on takeaway, where what we discovered in the study that has been brought to you is even worse for multi-use if we expand to takeaway. And we've also worked on an economic impact study and also on a hygiene study. So we're trying to bring facts to the debate so that public authority can decide future regulation, knowing what is happening.
So over to you, 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Elsa, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hi. Hello, everyone.
60 seconds.
No, I can hear. Thank you for the invitation. I'm here. I'm from the Exportation in Portugal. We are part of the Euroconsumers. We are the Euroconsumers. We gather 5 national organizations, and we are here as the voice of the consumer, because in fact it's a key point in the packaging and waste packaging. Our key points, in fact, is from a consumer's perspective, it's quite important to have certain regulations because the market it's becoming with a lot of information, and the consumers, they want to know, or they need to know what are the most sustainable products more, and we agree that all the politics, all the decisions, they should be based on proper technical studies. For example, if we want to a new product, we need to make sure that this new product, it's not worse in terms of environmental impact than the previous one. So, and for us, it's quite important to show and to the consumers what are the best products, the worst products, and of course we need life cycle assessments, risk assessments. We need a lot of tools that should be in place in order to make the comparison between the services and between the products.
Over to you, 60 seconds. Ronan, over to you, 60 seconds.
Thanks, Brian. Sorry, I missed the beginning of it there. Hi, everybody. My name is Ronan Breen. I'm the head of EU Public Affairs for Deliveroo, a food delivery company operating across 11 different countries and 5 of them within the EU. Those of you based in Brussels may be familiar with our company, with their bags flying around the place. But sustainability is a really important topic to us, and it's something that we think actually differentiates us from some of the other companies. Our view on the topic is based on our experience working with thousands of restaurants across the EU, big and small, and also on the basis of a packaging store that we run and provide packaging to a whole host of restaurants across the EU. Customers expect action in this area from regulators and business, and this is something that we're very, very conscious of, and I know obviously regulators are too. We think EU action can be really helpful, and it can make a big difference because fragmented rules make it more complex and make it much more complex for companies like us and restaurants, small ones in particular, to comply with rules. Harmonized definitions, standards are something that we would really welcome, and I think that's going to be an interesting point that we can touch on, Elsa, perhaps later on. But we think it's important also that the proposals that come out are realistic. For example, what is possible for a restaurant with people eating in is not necessarily possible for a restaurant when they're doing takeaway. And that's one of the things that we have a lot of experience of. We're really pleased to be part of the discussion and looking forward to sharing some of our experiences in this area later on.
Ronan, thank you. And finally, Wolfgang, over to you. 60 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. You know, the review of the PPWD is focusing mainly on, in the first place, on prevention of packaging, of waste generation. Secondly, on circularity, and the reuse, the topic of today, is just one area, one intervention area against these two big objectives to reduce waste generation. We are convinced that this is, and there is clear evidence that reuse and refill reduces the waste generation. So we are very, very keen to have to design a very well balanced measure or set of measures to bring up reuse systems. And I can reassure you, we are really heavily engaged in the scientific evidence for this measure that we will design on reuse, that it is efficient and that it is proportionate, so that the costs and benefits are considered, and that we choose a set of measures on reuse that is underpinned by evidence.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Let's start with you, Wolfgang, just in terms of how we define circular economy, how we define reuse as well, because it's a broad spectrum depending which side of the arguments people are coming from. For the Commission side, what are the key principles behind the circular economy and the key principles behind what reuse is all about?
Well, on this, there are, first of all, I might remind you that we have in the Circular Economy Action Plan this clear instruction that by 2030, all packaging must be recyclable or reusable. And we might even go one step further and say that even by 2030, the reusable packaging must be fully recyclable. So this is the recyclability, let's say, part of the reuse, let's say, circular. So the link between circularity and reuse systems, and secondly, we are having meanwhile the broader view, so that reuse, I told you already, reuse in the strict sense is reducing the waste generation, but we are also focusing on this especially with our aim to reduce waste generation, refill systems. And there are refill systems, bring your own container or cup, but also refill at home. So all this is in the context of the big objective, waste generation reduction, and within this we have these measures addressing at reuse systems, bringing up, promoting reuse.
Okay, thank you. I take the point that prevention is the first objective, that we don't want to have waste from the outset. That's the first thing. But when it comes to recycling and reuse as well, how much does energy consumption weigh? How much does water use weigh? Because we're now facing energy crisis, we're now facing water scarcity in different parts of Europe as well, and the price points attached to both those. I was talking to someone here in Brussels today, back from Washington. They were saying, their water bill is up over 50%. Their electricity bill has doubled in the year, and gas prices have doubled as well. So, in terms of all that as well, has the Commission shifted its thinking a bit on this because of these different dynamics, or had these been factored in at the beginning as well in terms of how you define a strategy for reuse, the viability of it? I go back to what Ronan said earlier about the plan has to be realistic. Wolfgang.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So in our let's say environmental impact assessment, we clearly have CO2 equivalent emissions on the screen. We have the water and the particulate matters or the air quality. These are our three main parameters that we assess in the impact assessment. And so we can reassure you, we increased in the last for the last model runs, we increased the price of the CO2 by until 2030 to I think to 100, and afterwards to 450 something. So we already, let's say, kind of, this was the shift that was done recently, but also, let's say, in this respect, water consumption, this is from the beginning, we are aware of this issue with the reuse system, the washing, but let maybe already come back a little bit to the presentation of the LCA today. I was always keen to learn what about the water consumption for the used single-use paper. I never saw these quantities that before they go into the recycling, they also must be clean. If you have from McDonald's McSunday or some ketchup in that also needs water. So, but no, let's I don't want to now to dig too deep into the LCA presented. We are aware of it. It was also presented, of course, to us at a stage when it was just two months ago. We are aware of it, and of course we appreciate to have this input from the stakeholders.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Ronan, the major challenges that you face for single-use reusables and takeaway sector as well, what are you up against in terms of the new policies coming forward, whether it's directive or regulation? How do you see what's workable? And go back to your word again, realistic. What do you see as a realistic policy outcome, Ronan?
The $1 million question. To be honest, I think really what we're looking for, I suppose, is something which takes account of the differences in what's possible in different aspects of the sector. And I gave the example of a restaurant which has, let's say, dine in and take away. There's two different possibilities there, and I think for reusables that's very viable for dine in. It is much more complex for takeaway. We've run a number of different trials with small scale trials really, but with reusable packaging in a number of different European markets, and they are with quite a lot of challenge. And I think we have to be realistic about that. There is the obstacle of one, having a uniformity, I suppose, of the same type of packaging being used by enough restaurants to give it a scale that makes it viable. And then you have the issue of return for customers. It's not something that it's not something that's insurmountable. But I think when you look at deposit return schemes in a number of different countries in relation to bottles and things like that, they have been successful to a degree. But it is difficult. And I think the biggest thing for it is scale, is how many customers are going to be engaging with this? How simple can it be? And therefore, how effective can it be? We have done a lot ourselves in making the packaging that we sell to restaurants, I suppose, be more sustainable, be more eco-friendly. We're phasing out black plastic entirely. We have, by the end of this year, 100% of our packaging sold in the EU will be either compostable or recyclable. And that's I suppose an area where I can see the scale works. That we have a store which is selling to thousands of small restaurants. And we can actually help them to make that shift through a store like ours. Whereas individual restaurants themselves, can they get involved in a scheme which does the reuse in the same way? I'm just not sure. And I'm not saying they can't. We don't necessarily have the answer, but certainly I think the experiences we've trialed, show that it is challenging, definitely.
Okay, Elsa, how should consumers view this? Should they be mandated to recycle themselves, or should the single-use approach be something at the forefront of their minds? This is entirely the responsibility of the food producers, the restaurants themselves. What role should the consumer play in this, Elsa?
Well, in fact, I think the overall roles, well, every sector have a role, and the consumer have a role as well. From a consumer perspective, and I agree with Ronan, we are quite concerned about to have the same strategy for different approaches. We know sometimes we should think also in what are we talking about, and we know, for example, as a takeaway, it's completely different from a restaurant. From a consumer perspective, I think there's a common sense, and the European consumers, they know that we should reuse more, and there's a lot of people that probably are already engaged, of course not the majority. But in this case, of course, we're talking about the packaging, but for example, for consumers' perspective, we have also some concerns that could be legal. For example, I give you an example. When we're talking about a reuse packaging, a container in the takeaway sector, if you will have like contamination in terms of the food, then the problem should be from the food, and and in this case, the guilty, let's say, is from the restaurant, or it's because the reusable packaging was not washed properly, or so. The point is, when we'll have a problem, who will decide from who is the guilty, for example? This is when, of course, this is not, it's a narrow concern about all this, but there are some things that we need also to think from consumers and a practical use in the lifetime. And at the same time, our aim, and we are talking with the consumers and explain, and made a lot of publications explaining that we need to reduce as most as possible. And of course, our key point is less is more. Of course, if we have less packaging, please use only the packaging really needed. But if you need to use, so let's choose the best products. And I think sometimes we have some new products. They are trying to substitute the single use, but I'm not sure if they really are the environmental friendly, or they are more sustainable than.
Why do you say that? What is it you think is perhaps not environmentally friendly about them?
It could be, for example, we have some examples. For example, we have some in some old days, some plastic cups or some plastic straws, for example, and now the point is we are replacing these with new materials. So the aim, we want to reduce. In fact, we are not reducing this, we are replacing with new materials, sometimes coming from, I don't know, some other countries, some other materials that at the end of the day, they are not recyclable, for example. So the point is, sometimes we have some paper packaging, some plastic packaging. They are single use, but they are recyclable, and probably they are better than some of the others that at the end of the day, when at the end of life, they are not recyclable at all. So this is the thing that we need to look for a technical perspective in order to decide what kind of materials should, or kind of products should be used.
I want to bring David and Wolfgang in a moment, but just on this as well, you made some very interesting points there. How do you think these elements of recyclability, reuse should be indexed? Because clearly there's a broad spectrum here, and we're not dealing with one type of restaurant or one type of set of packaging as well. There are different scenarios that have to be played here. But do we index the energy consumption? Is it just about CO2? How do you weight water scarcity in this as well? Should we have some sort of indexing system that approaches this? Because it doesn't seem that there's a lot of clarity in terms of establishing a path to a clear regulation which can be applied by the industry with some certainty. Elsa, how do you say it? What's your recommendation on this?
I think from a consumer's perspective, I know the point is it's quite hard to have like a label or something with all the environmental aspects, but it should be. We need some regulations, and we need some labeling from the European Commission, let's say, in order to try to highlight the products with less. I mean, there are any product without environmental impact, but we need to be sure, because we cannot give that kind of information to the hands of a manufacturer, because there's a lot of products we already read eco-friendly, or with some data or in the labeling concerning the environmental concerns. But some of them, or most of them, could be greenwashing, which is another problem. So in fact, we need certain labeling in order to try to understand what are the less environmental impact products, in order to help consumers how to choose.
I think we'll come back to that a bit later on in the conversation as well. Ronan, you want to respond to this?
Yeah, just to say, I think we've actually, it's something that we've experienced ourselves directly. We had a trial that we ran briefly where we were promoting restaurants that had sustainable packaging. And one of the biggest challenges we had was trying to actually determine what is considered sustainable packaging. What do we determine it is? Should we be the ones that are deciding that? And really, I suppose the thing is, the conclusion we came to is we shouldn't, and we wouldn't want to be. So I think where there can be harmonized and clear definitions and standards that are set by the EU and that apply across the board, that makes life much easier for organizations like us that would then look to promote that to a customer and allow a customer to make an informed decision saying, here's a restaurant that I know is meeting these standards and I would like to order from that restaurant rather than another.
David, just on the logistics of this as well for packaging, associated packaging companies as well, you know, what are the ambitions within the packaging industry in terms of renewable and recyclable products? What kind of direction and do you need from the Commission? Do you need from the European Union to guide you in this? Do you have the right framework at the moment, or is this something which is still really a work in progress?
In fact, I'd like to come back on some points. Why we need to compare single-use and multi-use, and why we need to bring evidences to the market. We're clearly in favor of the circularity, and the paper industry is one of the most circular one between the materials. Because honestly, the paper industry wouldn't live without the recycling process. There's not enough trees to make paper for all demand, so you need to have the recycling, and the recycling is well built in. And if you're comparing the two systems, in one system, the recycling, you're washing the fiber, so you get the packaging back into recycling plant. There's water, true, we're washing the fibers and making a new packaging, which is a valuable resource for a secondary application and avoids taking from the planet new products. So that's the recycling on one side. On the reused, and that's the thing that you will clearly need to bring to the audience, is the reuse is also a system. And on that system, you also need washing. So on one side, you're washing the fiber, you're avoiding taking a new fiber, and you're making a new product out of it. And we're clearly on the waste prevention side and on the circularity side. And on the other side, you're washing the item itself. And when you're washing the item, you have to look what kind of item you're washing, from what material is it coming, what is the end of life, because as Wolfgang said, all the reuse product will have to be recyclable. And it's not what we see from what is showing up on the market. The first generation of the reused product that we see, especially in food service industry, is made out of plastic and sometimes non-recyclable plastics. So they clearly need to be in regulation that we're comparing on a fair way, and recyclability needs to be included. And I think that's the future of our industry. The more reasonable single-use and paper-based has a lot of advantage compared to other materials, because we're from renewable resources. The recycling is not complex operation. You know, if you have food remainings into single-use or multi-use, you have to remove them. You're not going to put the plate with the pizza inside your dishwasher. So you're going to move the pizza. Same on the pizza box if you're using a single-use pizza box. And then the contamination is removed into the recycling process. So I think comparison is the key. Assumptions needs to be made and explained to the public, and what kind of products we're recycling, what is the future of our industry, and we have to adapt to that.
Okay, thank you. We're going to come back to some of that. We have loads of questions, so I'm going to start with some of these questions now, and just encourage others to send more in. First one for you, Wolfgang, from Paula Ivanuk. The European Commission has suggested reuse targets, in particular sector-specific reuse targets. What sectors are under consideration, and how has that decision been taken? Will the sectors be chosen similar to the model in the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation through the Delegated Act? There's a lot in there. Wolfgang.
Well, first of all, we are in the phase of the impact assessment, and therefore far from a proposal. We on the specific question, we are let's say evaluating, assessing all the sectors, and we are trying to dig out, to select those who have the most promising efficiency in terms of cost benefit, proportionality of the measure we do. So we try to dig out from a long list based on a ranking and on criteria. We will dig out a list of products, packaging types from different sectors. We know that even in the internet there is, or in the internet sales there is one. So there is the commercial and industrial area sector that where there are promising applications that would favor reuse systems. So mainly tertiary packaging, but also in the HoReCa sector indeed, and also in the groceries and retail. So in all these three sectors, we would let's say select packaging types at product level where we would impose reuse targets. And this is not, as I said, it's not yet far from being carved in stone. And well, I cannot even say if it will already make it into the, let's say, into the basic act, or it will come the list, the final list, and especially the targets in an implementing act. But from my experience about the political discussions, I think this is such a central point that the co-legislators will not, let's say, they want to have a say on this, and so I would assume that it will be in the Basic Act, the targets for the various product types.
Thank you. Just one other question for you there, Wolfgang. This comes from Lucas. Is the Commission really considering to set a mandatory DRS for plastic bottles, even if it means putting at risk integrated municipal waste management systems in some member states?
Well, the DRS is not so much the topic of today, so I will answer the question. But before, let me come back. Also, I made also some notes on what was discussed before, because there was also the discussion about logistics. What logistics are necessary for both alternatives, and we have really. From the, let's say, what we heard from the study, from the LCA study, we really are convinced that there is an infrastructure which still has to be developed, because as you know, the recycling rates that were in the study, they are let's say theoretical, and the reality is totally different for the recycling of these paper-based packagings or tableware, so there must happen a lot, and for this I still there are big challenges or big questions that are not yet answered to us in a convincing way from the concerned industry, and also the big thing of the takeaway. We hear that there are take-back systems should come in order to avoid that these takeaway packagings land either as litter in the landscape, or which is the worst, or at the best case in the public, in the bins of the public waste, and there it is also at the best burned but not never recycled. So these are all the issues that we still have with this model. Also, we also are not so let's say, also with respect to life cycle analysis, not so keen to say, okay, we are fine if it is finally composted, this paper. We think that a high quality recycling is, in terms of circular economy, still the first best, and this is what we strive for. So these were my comments. Now, the DRS. Mandatory DRS is clearly a measure to achieve high collection or recovery rates, and we hear from all sides when we want to have, let's say, high quality recycling, whether it is mechanical or chemical recycling or other. Each time they say we need to have clear or pure feedstocks into our recycling streams. So and in this respect, we have really good. There are very nice stories about DRS systems to deliver on that. Of course, if there is if we can be convinced that this, let's say, 90% collection target can be achieved by other systems, we are open to it. So it's not. Okay. I would not exclude that we are open to it, but we have strong doubts that other systems, even or be it EPR systems, or to achieve these collection targets. So we are not completely. We don't block these reasonings that there might be alternatives but we are not so much convinced.
Okay, thank you for that, Wolfgang. Okay, question for Ronan from Peter Barzak from the European Environmental Bureau. He says, can Deliveroo really lead sustainability in the field and incentivize your partner restaurants to use reusable takeaway containers and incentivize consumers to choose this option? Just before you answer, it's often the case that large-scale corporations like Coca-Cola, for example, they can change the whole supply chain because they only choose to work with partners who conduct their business in a certain way, including with renewable energy and packaging as well. For Deliveroo, in terms of Peter's question, how do you see it?
Well, I suppose you have to look at a couple of different things there. First of all, we don't, like Coca-Cola, I suppose Coca-Cola produces and uses the packaging. We often and usually don't. It's restaurants themselves. So we can encourage and we can incentivize. And we do have a packaging store. We've actually announced a subsidy of £2.5 million, almost €3 million, to subsidize more sustainable packaging for the restaurants that actually purchase through our stores. And that will be targeted on small and medium restaurants. To really have the greatest impact, because the larger chains, let's say, of restaurants can make that change themselves, and we don't need to necessarily subsidize that. But for the smaller ones, we can make a huge impact there. So I think, we can and we do want to do a lot in this area. But I think there are challenges. I think when it comes to reusable for takeaway, the difficulty, I think, just is there are a number of difficulties. I suppose scale is one that I mentioned earlier on, but I think Elsa mentioned also the issue of hygiene. If we're looking at a collection scheme, you have the issue of potentially people handling materials which then which are not clean, I suppose, which are potentially hazardous at a certain stage. You have customers who are potentially returning it to stores themselves. Is it every participating restaurant collects them? Do we arrange a collection itself? What are the emission differences, I suppose, of then the reusable packaging going back and taking a second journey? These are all things that we don't necessarily have the answer to, but are considerations for us in looking at this. And I think what we are doing at the moment is where we can, with the restaurants we work with, looking to make the biggest difference. But at the end of the day, these restaurants will have to make the decisions themselves on the packaging that they use. And so we can incentivize it, we can encourage it. But actually, there's a lot needs to be done to make sure that restaurants understand why they should be making this change and what is available for them, what's possible for them. So I would think of us as kind of a multiplier, and we have a whole host of actions that we've taken on on sustainability as a company, but I think where we can have the biggest impact is through that network of restaurants that we actually work with.
Okay, just another question for you, Ron, before I go on to someone else. From Emily Best. Emily Best from the Coalition for Toxic-Free Packaging. Nice snappy title. Items can be called recyclable or compostable, but if facilities don't exist at scale to handle these processes, then these items end up in landfill anyway. I don't want you to answer just specifically on for Deliveroo here, but on a wider scale. She asks, how can you ensure that these items are actually disposed of properly? In terms of what the industry can do, how can you ensure these items are disposed of properly?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question. I'm not exactly sure what we as an industry can do there, because there are colleagues of mine who are focused on this that would have probably a more sophisticated view on it than I do. But really, to me, the challenge there lies in the lack of infrastructure. We talked about infrastructure required for reusable, but in the same way, infrastructure is required for recyclable. So if governments and if municipal authorities and whoever else is responsible for waste collection and separation and treatment don't have the facilities in place, then we need to see how we can encourage and ensure that they do. Customers ultimately, I suppose the compliance and the efficiency of this will be highest when it's the simplest for the customer as possible. And Elsa will probably speak to that better than I can. But I mean, just as an individual, where there's an option for me to easily recycle something, I most certainly will. When it's not available to me, I don't have that choice.
Okay, thank you. Elsa, just in terms of consumer behavior, and I want to go to David for some more technical stuff. The consumer behavior, Elsa, it's, Ronan points to what most of us will do. It's if it's there and it's easy to do, we're going to do it. But if we have to make a big effort, or if we're in a hurry, or it's just a bit too complex, and I find this a lot. Just you go to some stores or some restaurants, and the instructions as to what you can actually put in there, you need a PhD to work it out, and the graphic illustration is very poor. And so, in terms of that, working with the consumer behavior, what needs to be done just to simplify that process to make it actually user-friendly? Elsa?
Yeah, in fact, if something is not easy to do it, the consumer will not do it. I mean, the majority of the consumers. So it needs to be easy to understand and easy to do it, as Roland said. If I have at home, we are doing the separation. Of course, we need to go to throw it in the different containers, but it should be simple, and we need to have this kind of containers, for example, in all the country. The problem is sometimes for the consumers, and here we are talking about the single use and the reusable. It needs to be something quite easy, otherwise it doesn't have the effect that we want to do it. And we need to explain why we should reduce and what kind of product should we bought. So in fact, for a consumer's perspective, it's important to explain, because in the last years we're talking a lot about the recycling and the collection, the separation, the collection to recycling. But now we are changing for the reuse. So if it's not as easy as the recycling, doesn't make sense. Even for the recycling, there are some countries where we really need to improve in terms of the collection. And then, as someone said, it's not only the matter of being recyclable material, it needs to be with quality. This is something that the consumer's perspective, we don't know. This is technical. So we need to understand, or we need to have the products, the better products to buy and to use it.
Okay, Elsa, earlier on you used the word contamination, and I have never in my life handed over a cup in Starbucks or anywhere else to have it refilled. The idea appalls me. There's so many elements of hygiene involved in this. Is this something we can reasonably expect as we begin to emerge from a pandemic, and now we have the cheerful headlines of monkeypox on the horizon as well? Is it reasonable to expect that consumers are going to risk contamination, or that staff are going to risk contamination to their own health by handing over a cup for reuse in a cafe or restaurant? Elsa?
This is, as I said, this is not the main concern in this subject, but there is something that we need to pay attention, because it's different. If I have my own cup, I can go to a shop and I use myself and my own cup, and it's okay. But when you are talking about, for example, reusable containers in a takeaway, and I know there are some pilots where it's the takeaway who give me the container, I'm using it, and then it's going again to the takeaway. And I need to be sure that they really will wash and in a proper way. And there are, especially with this pandemic, and there are some concerns from some of the consumers, like, because one thing, it's my own container, but in this case, I don't know who was the other person who already used this. So this is something, as I said, this is not a major topic, but it should be taken into account. And especially, for example, if you have a problem with the food, with a health problem, so now how can we be sure what is the problem? It was a problem of the food, a problem of the container. I mean, and from a consumer's perspective, we need to know how to deal with this. So we need
David, just David, on the washing process as well for reusables, the quality deteriorates over time. They don't have an infinite life, and there's degradation of the product as it is washed at high temperature. And now we have some evidence of microplastics in the water system as well as a direct consequence of this as a possibility too. So, David, how do you respond to that? That this there's a risk from this type of packaging as well. And just one other thing as well here, we have a number of different, there's tagged onto this, a number of different questions, one from Roger and two from Peter on additives to products to make them more waterproof as well. I'll take Roger's one in particular. To what extent is innovation considered? Perhaps paper coating with recyclable polymers will lead to a higher recycling rate, and or PP will at some point be 100% recyclable. So what's the risk element of reuse at the moment, and what are the innovation potentials for recycling currently as well? David?
What we discovered through the study is, of course, when you're dealing with food product, you need washing, but not only washing, you need drying. Because drying is when you're removing the water and you're removing the risk of a future contamination. And if you're in the HoReCa sector, the washing and the drying needs to be done in a very short cycle, like less than a minute, which has a significant impact in energy consumption to heat the water, to get to the right temperature, to kill the bacteria, and dry just afterwards in a very short time. So you can't compare an industrial washing system into a store with any kind of dishwasher to what you do at home, where you can have, if you have a lunch, dishes for lunch and then dishes for dinner, you can have a cycle that lasts 2 hours, 30 minutes, where the drying is done just by opening the door of your dishwasher. And that has been plugged in the study. And when you're comparing single-use on one side and reusable on the other side, the type of washing, that's why you have to compare systems, where you're computing the economic impact, but the environmental impact. And that's one of the key issues that we discovered, where the washing system in HoReCa in a very short time, because the peak hours, you can have many people. It's not exactly like home, where you wash for your home family and you maybe wash once a day or once every 2 days. So this has been plugged in the Ramboll model that we have displayed to you. That's for the first question. The second one, around recycling and contamination. In the paper industry, the big advantage we have is recycle all the fibers together. When you're discussing about plastic recycling, the main mechanical plastic recycling, you need to recycle PET with PET, PP with PP, PS with PS. And that's why sometimes you need to collect enough material each, you need to sort each of them, either with optical sorting or something else, and you need to recycle them separately. And of course, when you recycle them separately, you can get to a concept where you get bottle to bottle and make PET bottle out of recycled PET bottles. In the paper industry, if we're achieving higher recycling rate, and when we're discussing about higher recycling rate, we're above 80% in a lot of application, it's because all the fibers get into the same basket, and you make a secondary material, which is the recycled fibers. but that you can use for application that sometimes are not exactly the same as the first application. Typically, we're really recommending to recycle packaging with packaging and not with the printing, because the printing, you have some chemicals in printing inks that you don't have in the packaging. So when you're recycling packaging with a high level of food contact regulation, the high level of regulation that we have, or that we have in front of us, to get rid of mineral oil, to get rid of additives, to get rid of some chemicals that you had in the old days for some applications, you can really improve the quality of the recycled fibers that you get for further application. Maybe not direct for food contact, but for indirect food contact and for many applications that would help you not using virgin fibers for this application, like egg containers, toilet papers, tissue paper, a lot of things. So there's not really an issue in the paper industry, which is a recycle loop as one loop.
Okay, thank you. Wolfgang, we have a couple of questions for you here as well. The first one, the Commission promised in the CAP 2.0 an initiative of reuse in food service. This is from Roberto Colotto from 360 Degrees Food Service. Having seen the complexity of the transition and the uncertainties and lack of data, especially in the food service sector, wouldn't it be better to deal with this in the initiative instead of the PPWD?
What is her suggestion instead of dealing it in our review? Where does she want to have it better placed?
The initiative, but doesn't specify which one. I assumed you would know.
No, it's already very
Roberta, maybe add some more detail. We'll bring it back to Wolfgang. Second question is from Elliot Gorant. Given the recent developments of the legislative process on the PPWD revision with the Regulatory Scrutiny Board's opinion, is the Commission still on track to publish the proposal in July?
Clearly, no. Yes, so this is an easy answer. No, this is impossible now. But it's also, I think, a good chance to underpin more our scientifically underpin more our impact assessment, and this will be the base for the legislative proposal to design our preferred option. I think now we have, because also the board was very keen to have proportionality in all measures, and we have now the chance to deliver more in this respect. Also, what I already announced, the science base of our final proposal will improve due to the fact that we got, unfortunately, nonetheless, a negative opinion. But it is now. I can go now. I can also be a little bit more deliver even more. So it will. We still hope that it will come in the fourth quarter of this year. So it is over summer break, and so we have now lost this momentum. Yes, but it will. We are still hoping to come in the fourth quarter. Yes.
Thank you for that. Just something occurs to me when we're talking about this, that there's got to be an inherent tension between DG GROW and DG ENVI on this as well. You know, the burden on food service, the burden on packaging, the burden on local councils, in terms of cost, the infrastructure, all the different dynamics of logistics that are required for PPWD to be implemented eventually. How does DG ENVI relate to DG GROW in this? Because the economy is not in its best shape ever right now, and we're looking at adding on heavier costs, of course, for a very good reason. But how do you dance this dance in terms of producing a realistic proposal which is economically viable? Wolfgang?
Yeah, absolutely. Even the recyclability in the circular economy mentions that it must be done in an economically viable way. No, the relation with there is not, I wouldn't even say there is a tension between GROW and ENVI. We have very close, just yesterday or this week we had a meeting with them and with the respective unit, no, we are, let's say, when it comes to the economic impacts, there are of course winners and losers. We are aware of it. We will create jobs in the reuse sector, and those who produce the packaging, they will have losses, because I think we have just roughly several billions of euro less material costs if our waste prevention measures materialize. In this respect, then we will have, of course, losses in or less material costs of the industry. But that means also that the producers of this packaging, they have turnover losses. Or yes, we are aware of it, but I think this is not even challenged by DG GROW. This is the transition, the green transition. We will create jobs in one area, and we will there will be less in other areas, especially if you compare. We have the baseline says we have we create by 2030 I think 24 compared to 2018, 24% more packaging. And if we reduce this considerably, this additional, and we reduce the waste generation, of course that reduces the turnover of the waste of the packaging producers. That's normal. No, but as you mentioned, we have GROW. We have very close relationship also with the Circular Plastic Alliance, which is a GROW baby, if I can put it like that. We have very good, and also with the standardization. We really, they support us a lot in terms of standardization, design for recyclability. No, it's excellent. And also now, as we're coming back to the other DGs and coming back to the composting, we have also a close cooperation with DG Agri, and we strive for consistent approaches in terms of what they do in terms of fruit and vegetable packaging, unavoidable packaging for fruit and vegetable. We are also there in a very good cooperation with Agri colleagues.
Thank you, Wolfgang. David, if I can crudely summarize what Wolfgang said, your industry is going to the altar to be sacrificed in the interests of a more sustainable policy. How do you feel about that?
Anyhow, you will need single use, and you need a sensible, safe single use. And paper is among the safest, because we are with very strong regulation, and we'll continue to demonstrate that our products are safe and they can bring service to the users and service also into the hygiene. If billions of consumers eat and drink in our products, it's because they bring some value to the system. And we're not opposing. There will be reuse developing, and a sensible reuse. A reuse where you'll have the system-based approach being applied, so that you take into account the effect of washing, you take into account the effect of end of life, and there will be space for sensible or efficient single-use paper. And we think our material, paper, that has a very low carbon impact, that can be recycled, that doesn't take any non-renewable resources, is the perfect material to remain for some application. One of the examples, if you want to do waste prevention, is for example to develop bulk. And if you want to develop bulk sale of liquid, other people in all occasions and in all places come with their containers, but in some areas they won't come with their containers. So they will need to have a sensible containers to have bulk liquid delivered to them. And typically paper cup can be one of the examples that can be used for bulk delivery. And if you're delivering liquid in bulk, you don't need the bottles. So I think we need to compare, we don't need to oppose, and there will be markets, and we hope regulation will help us comparing systems and demonstrate and opt out for single use in HoReCa segment if we really demonstrate that it's better for the environment with the life cycles thinking, and also the approach that takes into account all the effects, including end of life. Because what we see with some very constrained market, where reusable have been imposed by force, is it's typically we're seeing the plastic use for reusables coming at a very high speed, and the objective, typically the objective of SUPD, Single-Use Plastic Directive, that was to get rid of plastic. We have plastic going into volumes that we didn't see before with the single-use products that were there a couple of years ago. And the risk is that some of the multi-use plastic product will also leak in the environment. And there will be discussion about what kind of multi-use, what is a sensible multi-use. It's not sure that it will be all glass. There will be a lot of plastic multi-use.
Okay, let me stop there. We're really close in time. I want to get a quick response from Wolfgang, and then we're going to do the closing remarks from each one. Just Wolfgang, before, I know you wanted to follow up on that, but just before that, so many European policies end up, at least at the beginning, punishing compliant European manufacturers and allowing in from Asia, for example, substandard products or equivalent products produced at a higher environmental cost. Is this going to happen with the PPWD? Are we going to raise the standards for Europe and consequently the purchasing of other products come in from Asia and basically junk the market? Wolfgang?
Well, the main let's say issue that I can imagine in this context is the recycled content that we are envisaging for plastic packaging, and here we will make sure that also the importer has to of this plastic packaging has to guarantee that by means of custody of chain methods that the imported product has the same standard than the one produced in the EU.
I don't want to cut you short, but I know you wanted to follow up on the other thing, and then I have to ask you.
Yeah, it will not be long, but just to no, it's not so black and white that we say we sacrifice the packaging. We see, of course, but they have to cope with the challenges, as I mentioned already, that currently there is just a small recovery rate of their packaging that is really making it into a recycling. I fully agree with the 90% of the recycling when it is in the factory, but before that there is what I mentioned already at the beginning. You have to have the full infrastructure, especially also for the takeaway packaging.
Thank you, Wolfgang, indeed. All right, let's go to our final sound bites to close up. Ronan, let's start with you. 30 seconds for your takeaway for today. Literally your takeaway for today.
Thanks. Yeah, I think, look, consumers want this, and it's important that we as businesses and as regulators also respond to it. I think we're very happy to be a part of that. Standards, definitions, uniformity make this easier, make it work better. The more that it can be harmonized, the better it is. And I think, again, just taking account of the differences in the different sectors and how we can best achieve it will lead us to a good outcome.
Thank you. Elsa, 30 seconds.
So from a consumer's perspective, what we're taking is, in fact, there is a lot, still some rules to decide, still some rules to study, and it's quite important to be as user-friendly as possible. It needs to be, all the information needs to be provided to the consumer as a easiest way, good products, good sortings, how to do it, what is the best ones or the wrong products. So it needs to be very easy, otherwise the consumer's behavior is quite hard to change. So it must be as simple as possible.
Thank you. David, 30 seconds.
Same. We think future regulation should do evidence based on science and environmental science, and we understand that for our industry the issue is more the collecting than the recycling. So we should do everything to promote through ERP, through take-back system, any way to collect and use the valuable resources out of a packaging to make a secondary packaging. That should be promoted in the future.
Thank you, David. Wolfgang, last word, 30 seconds.
Yes, so we are really striving in the Commission with this review for a balanced approach. We don't see 100% solutions. We see there is an optimum in several areas, and for instance, the EPPA has to work on the recovery, but also the reuse systems, for instance, in efficiency on the water consumption. There are there's good hope that in both directions we can move, and with this we would see the future will be a combination of optimized efficient measures in this area.
Wolfgang, thank you. So our thanks to Emiliano, Wolfgang, David, Elsa and Ronan for their excellent contributions today. Our thanks to our audience who've been super active. I'm sorry I couldn't take more of your questions this afternoon, but thank you for engaging so well. And to the team in the studio here, you can't see them, I can from where I'm sitting. And a few more behind us just here as well. Zoran, Anna, Bonya and Marius, and also to the EPP for their support for the program today. I wish you a good afternoon.